Pitch blackness envelops the Florida Strait, a desolate expanse of water where the crushing weight of isolation meets the relentless churn of the sea. It is the dead of night, and a lone human figure is suspended in this abyssal void, her arms churning through the salt water with a mechanical, agonizing rhythm. Her tongue is swollen to the size of a tennis ball, her lungs burn with inhaled sea spray, and her mind teeters on the precipice of total delirium. This is not a nightmare, but the brutal reality of an endurance quest that has consumed a lifetime. The stretch of ocean between Cuba and Florida spans roughly 110 miles, an unpredictable gauntlet of treacherous currents, sudden squalls, and apex predators. For decades, it has stood as the Mount Everest of marathon swimming, mocking those who dared to bridge the continental divide with mere flesh and bone. In 2013, at the age of 64, Diana Nyad threw herself into this unforgiving channel for the fifth time. Most observers viewed her quest as a dangerous obsession, a battle against biological limits that she was destined to lose yet again. To understand the sheer audacity of this final attempt, one must rewind to the genesis of her fixation. In 1978, a 28-year-old Nyad first plunged into the waters off Havana, fueled by the boundless arrogance of youth and a formidable athletic pedigree. She was a world record holder, seemingly invincible, but the ocean quickly delivered a humbling lesson. After 42 hours of fighting monstrous swells and erratic winds, she was pulled from the water, defeated, her body battered, and her ego shattered by the indifferent power of the sea. Following that crushing failure, she walked away from marathon swimming entirely, embarking on a successful career in sports broadcasting and leaving the open water behind for 3 decades. Yet, the ghost of the Florida Strait lingered in the periphery of her consciousness, an unresolved chord in the symphony of her life. As she approached her 60th birthday, an existential dread began to take hold. The realization of her own mortality sparked a dormant fire, transforming a forgotten youthful ambition into a profound, undeniable imperative to prove that her physical and mental prime had not yet passed. The road to redemption demanded a physiological resurrection. Nyad subjected herself to a training regimen that defied medical logic for a person of any age, let alone someone in their 60s. She endured 12-hour continuous swims in a Caribbean pool, tethered to a wall, staring at a black line on the bottom while her muscles screamed for oxygen. This brutal conditioning was designed to rebuild her VO2 max, the maximum rate at which the heart, lungs, and muscles can effectively use oxygen during exercise, pushing her cardiovascular engine to its absolute zenith. But physical conditioning alone cannot conquer the Florida Strait, a truth brutally reinforced during her return attempts in 2011. The primary adversary was the Gulf Stream, a powerful, warm ocean current originating in the Gulf of Mexico that acts as a high-speed aquatic treadmill. If a swimmer's pace drops, or if the current shifts unpredictably, they can be swept dozens of miles off course, turning a linear journey into an impossible, meandering trap. Nyad was repeatedly thwarted by asthma attacks and the overwhelming force of this relentless oceanic river. The most terrifying obstacle, however, emerged from the depths during her 2012 attempt. The waters of the strait are infested with the box jellyfish, a species whose venom is among the most lethal on the planet. When invisible tentacles wrapped around her neck and arms, the stings delivered a paralyzing neurotoxin that induced temporary blindness, severe respiratory distress, and an agony she likened to being dipped in burning oil. She barely escaped with her life, her fourth failure cementing the impossible nature of the crossing. Defeat, rather than destroying her resolve, catalyzed a revolution in her approach. Nyad realized that sheer willpower was insufficient. She needed a sophisticated logistical apparatus to survive the crossing. She assembled the Xtreme Dream team, a dedicated crew of over 40 experts, including meteorologists, navigators, medical professionals, and shark divers. Led by her intrepid head handler, Bonnie Stoll, this floating command center transformed a solitary athletic endeavor into a massive, synchronized military operation. To neutralize the lethal threat of the jellyfish, her team engineered a radical, albeit agonizing, solution. They developed a custom-made silicone jellyfish mask that covered her entire face, coupled with a full-body stinger suit. While this armor offered vital protection, it came at a severe physiological cost. The mask severely restricted her oxygen intake, caused brutal chafing around her mouth, and forced her to swallow excessive amounts of corrosive salt water, making the simple act of breathing a torturous chore. Armed with this hard-won knowledge and specialized gear, the morning of August 31st, 2013, marked the beginning of her ultimate reckoning. Standing on the jagged rocks of the Hemingway Marina in Havana, Nyad looked out at the glassy, deceptively calm surface of the water. With a final, steadying breath, she leaped into the ocean, initiating a journey that would demand every ounce of her heavily fortified resilience. There was no turning back. This was the culmination of 35 years of longing. As the sun dipped below the horizon on her first day, the true psychological warfare commenced. Open water swimming at night is an exercise in profound sensory deprivation, plunging the athlete into a disorienting, ink-black void where the boundary between the water and the sky vanishes. Nyad swam in darkness, guided only by a faint red light attached to a kayak, her mind left alone to grapple with the terrifying vastness of the deep and the unseen creatures lurking beneath her kicking feet. To stave off the creeping madness of the void, she employed rigorous cognitive strategies. She counted her strokes in English, French, and Spanish, creating a rhythmic mental metronome that blocked out the pain and the terrifying isolation. Yet, as the hours bled into days, the extreme exhaustion triggered vivid hallucinations. She saw the Taj Mahal rising majestically from the ocean depths and envisioned the yellow brick road unfolding beneath the waves, her brain desperately misfiring as it struggled to process the relentless physical trauma. By the second day, the ocean began to exact its inevitable toll on her aging body. Despite the warm surface temperature of the water, prolonged exposure induced a dangerous drop in her core body temperature. She burned calories at an astronomical rate, entering a severe caloric deficit that her handlers desperately tried to mitigate by feeding her a specialized liquid diet through a tube every 45 minutes. Every feeding was a frantic race against the clock, as pausing for too long allowed the ocean currents to push her backward. The burden of the expedition weighed heavily, not just on Nyad, but on the entire support team. The crew operated in a state of chronic sleep deprivation, constantly monitoring radar for squalls, scanning the water for sharks, and meticulously calculating her trajectory through the erratic Gulf Stream. Bonnie Stoll stood on the deck for days, shouting encouragement, monitoring Nyad's stroke rate, and hiding her own mounting anxiety as she watched her closest friend's body slowly deteriorate under the punishing conditions. As the second night fell, the dreaded jellyfish protocol was initiated. Nyad was forced to don the restrictive silicone mask, a process that immediately induced feelings of claustrophobia and panic. For hours, she thrashed through the water, her breathing labored, her face raw and bleeding from the friction of the latex. The mask was a necessary evil, a suffocating barrier that kept the venomous tentacles at bay, but pushed her respiratory system to the absolute brink of failure. The 40-hour mark brought a crisis of epic proportions. Nyad's stroke rate plummeted. Her responses to the crew became sluggish and incoherent, and her body began to shut down, initiating a desperate biological mandate to cease the torture. It was in this harrowing crucible that the true nature of her endeavor was revealed. This was no longer an athletic event. It was a profound spiritual battle, a testament to a human will overriding the fundamental instinct for self-preservation. Then, as dawn broke on the third day, a faint, shimmering line appeared on the northern horizon. It was the unmistakable glow of the Florida Keys. The sight of land, after days of endless blue and black emptiness, sent a surge of adrenaline through her depleted system. The impossible dream, the obsession that had haunted her since 1978, was suddenly, agonizingly, within reach. However, the final miles proved to be the most treacherous. The ocean, as if reluctant to release its prisoner, threw a fierce countercurrent against her, reducing her progress to a crawl. For hours, she swam with everything she had left, yet the shoreline seemed to mock her, remaining stubbornly distant. Every stroke was an exercise in pure agony, her shoulders grinding with inflammation, her throat scorched by salt, her mind solely focused on the sand she could see but could not touch. The atmosphere on the support boats shifted from tense vigilance to overwhelming emotional release. The crew, who had shared in her suffering, her failures, and her unbreakable resolve, began to realize that history was unfolding before their eyes. They navigated the final stretch through the shallow reefs, guiding her toward Smathers Beach in Key West, where a massive crowd had gathered, drawn by the news of this miraculous, unfolding triumph. On September 2, 2013, after an astonishing 53-hour swim in the open ocean, Diana Nyad finally felt the ocean floor beneath her feet. She stumbled, her legs buckling after days of weightlessness, her face grotesquely swollen from the salt water and the abrasive mask. Aides rushed into the surf to support her, but she insisted on walking those final, agonizing steps onto the dry sand under her own power, completing the epic journey. As the crowd erupted in a cacophony of cheers and tears, Nyad, barely able to articulate through her swollen lips, delivered a message that would resonate far beyond the world of sports. She offered 3 simple, profound sentences to the listening world. First, we should never, ever give up. Second, you are never too old to chase your dream. And third, it looks like a solitary sport, but it is a team. Those words crystallized the essence of her decades-long struggle. Her victory was not merely a conquest of the Florida Strait. It was a defiant rejection of societal expectations regarding age, gender, and the perceived limits of the human body. She had proven that the fire of ambition does not have to extinguish with the passing of time, and that the most profound achievements often rise from the ashes of repeated, heartbreaking failure. The success of the Cuba to Florida swim also redefined the concept of individual athletic achievement. Nyad's acknowledgement of her team highlighted the invisible architecture of support necessary for extraordinary feats. Without the navigators mapping the Gulf Stream, the handlers managing her nutrition, and the divers protecting her from predators, her indomitable will would have been swallowed by the sea. It was a triumph of collective human ingenuity, serving a singular, unrelenting vision. In the annals of extreme endurance, this crossing remains a benchmark of unparalleled psychological fortitude. It forces a reevaluation of what happens when a human being refuses to accept defeat, enduring venom, hypothermia, and the terrifying expanse of the open ocean. Nyad's journey serves as a masterclass in resilience, illustrating that the barriers we perceive are often psychological constructs waiting to be dismantled by sheer, stubborn perseverance. Today, the waters between Havana and Key West still churn with the same indifferent power, a wild and untamed frontier. But the strait is forever altered by the memory of the woman who refused to let it conquer her. Diana Nyad's monumental swim stands as an eternal testament to the human spirit, a roaring declaration that as long as there is breath in our lungs, no horizon is truly out of reach.